All right, hello, hello. Today we are talking about pen and ink. The first thing that I wanted to discuss with you is the implements for drawing. So in your materials list, I asked you to get something like this, which is kind of an all-in-one pack. And just to explain what's in the pack, these are the nibs, N-I-B-S, and those are what kind of holds the ink and creates the line quality that you're looking for. These over here, I've heard them called pen holders, very straightforward. I've also heard them called a stylus. Either way, the nibs are going to really dictate the type of line, and those are probably the most important. The pen holder or the nib holder is really just the mechanism for what you hold on to and what creates the line. So find the one that is most comfortable for you. Often you'll just get a very standard one. That's going to work just great. There are different types of pens though, and most commonly you're going to find the ones where the nib comes interchangeably. Maybe it's permanent. This one is permanently affixed and this one has an interchangeable nib. So these are kind of two styles similar. This one obviously a little older in style, this one a little newer. And then you have a variety of items like this bamboo pen. You could also make pens you've probably seen in old movies out of feathers. Really any kind of stiff but slightly flexible surface that you can carve into this sort of triangular pattern with a little slit that helps hold the ink can be made into a pen. So historically, pens have been made out of quills, feathers, bone, bamboo, wood, metal, all sorts of different things can be used to hold the ink. And so that then has different effects. The other thing that I wanted you to have, which was optional but I find very helpful, is just a paintbrush. This is a watercolor paintbrush, and this is kind of a medium size with a tapered tip. Okay, and you'll see how that comes into play later. But right now I just wanted to talk about these two styles. So most often your nibs will come in two distinct styles. Number one is this pointed, and number two is this sort of blunt style. Both of those have different types of writing quality. Either of those may have been included in your kit, or you just might have them with you. So I wanted to just kind of discuss both of those for now. Next up, I want to talk about ink. So two specific ink styles that I wanted you to get was the waterproof. This is often called India ink. That's a very popular type of ink, is India ink. It does not have to be India ink though. The important part is that it is pure black and it is waterproof. The other one I wanted you to get was a water soluble, or this one says non-waterproof. Means the same thing. So you'll see that the waterproof and the water soluble ones do very different things. So I wanted you to get both of those, both in black. We will be exclusively working with black. However, there are different options if you continue to explore this later on. If you get the bug for pen and ink, you can get them in all sorts of different colors. So that can really kind of widen the range of what you're able to do. Next up are little containers of water. So very much like watercolor, you want to have available different pots of water. Why is this helpful? Because you can then adjust the value or the intensity of the black that we are adding to this. So I am grabbing this water soluble. It has a little dropper at the top. This one is old, so we'll see if it still works. I do hope so. Nope, this one's a little too elderly. Let's try this one. Oh, we got something. So ideally your dropper is participating a little bit better. Mine are just about, oh gosh, 10 years old. So they're near the end of their life. But you just squeeze that top part, it sucks that ink up into the dropper, and then you can squeeze that down into the water. And the idea of multiple water baths is that you can add more or less ink to each of those to create different intensities of black. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush here and just mix that around a little bit. Again, this is water soluble, so it should be able to be reconstituted with the water. If I were using my waterproof ink, this might be just way too old to work with, but I'm going to try here. So you can see that this one here is very light gray. This one is a medium gray, and then I can always use straight out of the bottle for the darkest dark. So I'm just going to grab this brush just to give you an idea of that color. And I'm going to do this one to give you an idea of that value. And I said color, that was actually a mistake. This is just purely value. So we're working exclusively with value. So you can kind of see a very slight difference in the intensity of those. But if I were using this for a drawing, I might say, nope, I actually want this to be even more intense. So I'm going to add even more ink to this one just to increase the range of values that I'm working with here. Normally you wouldn't want to just dump that in, but again, I'm dealing with the older ink, so I'm doing what I can here. Oh man, look at that. So now we have some nice rich black here. We have a really soft gray. And then again, if I go straight from the bottle, that's going to be pure black. So those are going to be actually really fun for me to work with. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to leave that. Again, if you wanted more values, you could certainly have more water pots, or you could start light and just keep adding more as you kept working with your drawing. But it's going to be very important that you start with the type of gray that you want to work with first. And again, one reason why I like to have the brush. Okay, so I'm going to start with this style of nib here, which is the blunt nose. I'm just going to go ahead and dip it into the water pot. Make sure that the tip of your nib is submerged in the water, and then you're going to go ahead and brush it just gently off the lip of whatever jar lid you're working with. Then you can carry it just like a pencil. Have a nice even downstroke. I'm getting a little bit of a patchy line, so that means I need to load it up with even more ink. Let's try it again. There we go. Now I'm getting a nice rich line there. That is what I'm looking for. Now, another really nice rule to this type particularly is that I can only do a downstroke. I can do an angled downstroke, but I cannot ever, with my ink, go up. That sound is just grating on my ears, and you're going to ruin your nib that way. So only go in a downstroke. You can, of course, do any type, and that is then also where we get into calligraphy. Oh gosh, do I even remember any calligraphy? That was not proper calligraphy, but something like that, which gets you the idea of always the downstroke. When you do different types of angled strokes, you can get different widths of that line. So this tip is particularly fun when you are using it for drawing purposes. It can be a little bit difficult to plan out where you want the thick line and where you want the thin line, but it is very fun, and this is a typical calligraphy nib. What you'll be working with more commonly is this straight nib. So this nice regular point, and you probably have a variety of different sizes. That just equates to the different type of line size. So again, I can only go down or diagonal and down with this tip. This gets me a very sharp, beautiful line. So this is again great for detail work. Really beautiful, detailed, straight, sharp, precise lines. So that's what this one is going to be for. Now, the brush isn't just great for mixing, it is also great for adding shadow. And if I'm working with the water-soluble ink, if I go back in with the paintbrush and the ink, I can actually start to manipulate some of the lines that I have created. So the way that I would plan out a drawing is probably to go in really lightly with pencil first, go in with a really light gray to add my shadows, to really lay down a little bit of value tone, then to go back in maybe with some deeper shadows, and then add in those detail lines. And as you are adding those detail lines in, you can choose, do I want those to be water soluble? Do I want those to continue to be malleable? Or do I want to use a waterproof ink so that those lines stay sharp and crisp no matter what value I add to that? Okay, so I recommend a little bit of material exploration with that. You can always, again, with the water soluble, even with something that is completely dry, if you have the water soluble ink, you can go in and massage with that paintbrush and kind of lift those lines a little bit. So you can create a soft edge there. Versus if I were using the waterproof ink, I would get this nice sharp line and that would stay there forever. Okay, so play around with that a little bit, play around with all of these different techniques. I do recommend you have a brush, but even if you just have the pen and ink, play around with the different tones, the different levels of black that you can get, the different line qualities you can get, play around with going only in that single direction and in angles, and then you'll have to kind of use your brain to plan out how you can continue that drawing with just going in those downward directions. Okay, so that is it for material exploration. I did want to quickly just show you a couple of works in progress just so you can get the idea of, you know, how does one start to map out these ideas. So number one, this is a drawing that was done with not only pen and ink, but also some white ink. So I don't actually remember, I do believe this is a white gouache, actually. So there's pen and ink as the base. This is on a mylar material, so that's fun to work with. So I had to use all waterproof materials here because it just wouldn't adhere to anything. For you, you'll definitely want the multimedia paper. If you try to do this on drawing paper, it will just completely destroy the paper. Here's one also that's a little bit of mixed media. So you see I started with the value tones, added some different darker lines as a sort of rough gestural drawing there. Let's see. A little bit of a perspective drawing here. Looking downward onto the face. So again, this kind of value blocking to get the overall gesture there, and then the texture lines to create different shadows and lines to create a little bit more of a detailed portrait than the last, but still kind of gestural. A lot of energy, interesting perspective, looking down upon a person. Let's see, and then this one can see is maybe more relevant to what you are doing. This is more of a landscape. It does not fit into the screen. So this was an Indian temple. So this was actually an in situ drawing, so plein air. I was there in person making this drawing, so you can see how I started the overall structure with the pencil, went in and added a very light gray tone to that, and then continued to build and add textures. Unfortunately, I wasn't there long enough to finish this, but this is a great illustration for you to see you know, as I started adding those darker lines, the darker lines are the very last detail steps that I would do. It first starts again with that pencil, the light gray value, adding texture, adding blacks. Make sure that the very black items are the very last that you do. Okay, so that was a really quick tutorial, not even a tutorial, just a little exploration of those materials. So please do explore those materials, whichever you are working with, because we will continue to play with that pen and ink and have fun.